Like and subscribe and click the bell icon to get new video updates.
Ukraine-Russia war updates. Volodymyr Zelenskyy says he will not surrender Ukrainian territory to end the war, as it happened with Russia amassing more of its forces to the east of Ukraine and looking set to increase its assault on the Donbas region. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says he is not willing to give up territory to do a peace deal. Take a look back at Monday's events in our blog. Key events live updates. Fears for residents of Mariupol. Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister Iryna Vereshchuk urged Russian forces to let people flee besieged Mariupol. Once again, we demand the opening of a humanitarian corridor for the evacuation of civilians, especially women and children, from Mariupol, Vereshchuk wrote. Zelenskyy, describing the situation there as inhuman, called on the West to immediately provide heavy weapons. Mariupol has become a symbol of Ukraine's unexpectedly fierce resistance since Russian troops invaded the former Soviet state on February 24. The Union World Food Programme says that more than 100,000 civilians there are on the verge of famine, and lacking water and heating. Ukrainian officials said the city was on the verge of a humanitarian catastrophe. NGO World Central Kitchen staff injured by missile attack in Kharkiv Russia's bombardment of cities around Ukraine on Saturday included an explosion in Kharkiv that destroyed a community kitchen. Associated Press journalists at the scene recorded the immediate aftermath of the apparent missile attack. Kharkiv Mayor Ihor Terekhov said 3 people were killed and 34 wounded by missile strikes Saturday in that city alone. The kitchen was set up by World Central Kitchen, which is run by celebrity chef José Andrés to establish feeding systems in disaster and war zones. Andrés tweeted that the non-governmental organization's staff members were shaken but safe. The organization says it has now reached 30 cities across the country, providing nearly 300,000 meals a day. Andrés said the attack in Kharkiv shows that to give food in the middle of a senseless war is an act of courage, resilience and resistance, and that his group's chefs will keep cooking for Ukraine. Cluster bombs maimed Chernihiv villages. Russian forces never made it into the encircled city of Chernihiv in Ukraine's northeast. Instead, they inflicted a relentless campaign of bombardment on civilians, who hid in basements for a month with no power, heat or running water. Residents braved shelling and artillery fire to find scarce food. People queuing for bread died in a Russian airstrike that killed 47 civilians in a public square. I believe that all this was on purpose, to cause panic, to finish our people off with direct attacks against ordinary civilians, said Dr Vladyslav Kukhar, the director of the region's biggest medical institution, Chernihiv City Hospital No. 2. Russian attacks destroyed homes, medical facilities, schools, gas pipes and water infrastructure. Dr Khukar was inside his hospital when the emergency department was destroyed by a shelling on March 17. The shock wave sent glass, shrapnel and doors through the building, injuring doctors and patients. The hospital shook and the corridors filled with a dense fog from white dust, Dr Khukar told the ABC. Patients were screaming. We were worried about the patients who were already on the operating table. Despite the direct risk to their lives, the doctors didn't leave, knowing that if the operations were stopped, the patients wouldn't survive. It was true heroism. Russian forces have attacked more than 100 Ukrainian health facilities, in what the World Health Organization describes as a deliberate campaign. Chernihiv City Hospital No. 2 is now pockmarked by artillery fire, its shattered windows boarded up. But civilians still pile into its outdated wards, with lost limbs and devastating injuries. Read more about the effects on the region here. Pope makes Easter plea in an Easter Sunday message aimed at the world but heavily focused on Ukraine. Pope Francis raised 2 worries: the risk of nuclear warfare and that other armed conflicts on the globe will go unnoticed. In a speech from the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, the Pope quoted a declaration from scientists in the 1950s in which they posed the question, shall we put an end to the human race, or shall mankind renounce war? The Pope has repeatedly made anguished pleas for a ceasefire and negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. In his Easter message, Francis lamented that so many of our brothers and sisters have had to lock themselves away in order to be safe from bombing. He expressed hope that the war in Europe will also make us more concerned about other situations of conflict, suffering and sorrow in situations that we cannot overlook and do not want to forget. Many of the nearly 5 million people who have fled Ukraine will not have homes to return to, the United Nations warns. UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, says 4,836,445,